Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. How do you manage an economy in the times of pandemic, Russian war, and also challenging fiscal situation? Well, we are grateful to have the Finance Minister, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, to explain to us and breathe us in on how things are being managed in the times when economies around the world are all taking a hit and some have even gone under. How can we survive this global turbulence as a country? Honorable, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's been a while.
And how are you doing yourself?
I think you captured it. Global turbulence and therefore difficulties for our own country and how to keep a steady head to steer us back into macroeconomic stability and all of that. So it's been hectic, but really confident that we've done this before, and therefore we should be able to do that. And asking Ghanaians to trust that we have the endurance, the perseverance, and the wherewithal to be able to bring us back. And I think for us it's encouraging because we did meet an IMF program before, and we successfully went through it. So yes, excited about the future and the commitment of President Akufo-Addo and the team to get us through this one too. We've done it before, and this one too shall pass.
Indeed, shall pass. How are you yourself doing as well? I mean, I remember the last time you had an interview, you came out to things we thought you didn't even tell us how you're feeling and all the rest. But now I hope everything's okay.
Oh, pretty good. I think I'm much stronger than then. It's been interesting managing health and work, but we are good. I'm looking forward to a medical review next week and come back strong for the fall.
Let's come back to the mid-year review that you presented.
Yeah.
For you, one would say that interesting targets that were put in this mid-year review. How optimistic are you that this time we would all stick by it?
Yeah.
Your colleague ministers will stick by it because of the current environment that we find ourselves? Yeah.
Good question. I mean, I think it's going to require, discipline on all sides. But you know that at the beginning of the year, we had some very drastic expenditure cuts, 30% or so. And we have done quite well with those. The numbers are good. So I expect that we'll be able to do that. I mean, we did go through our estimates for revenue, and really given the difficulties we went through Parliament, revenue measures were not technically approved until maybe March 29th, which means 5 odd months since then. So that's difficult. So as you can see in the budget, the mid-year review, revenues are coming down from 100 billion to about 96 billion, really ratcheting down our revenue expectations by literally about 10 billion cedis, partly also because of e-levy, which was quite a significant part of the revenues that we're going to raise. So we're cushioned a bit going forward by the increase in petroleum, because we estimate about $61 a barrel, now about 94 on average. And so we expect to claw back about 5 or 6 billion from the 10 billion we are losing from revenues. And then we also had upward revisions of our VAT that we are putting there for investors, for importers when they come through, and then grants are also going to go up. So that brings us to a loss of some $3 billion cedis or so for that. But then in the expenditure part, we also revised that from 137 billion to 135 billion, and to keep within the appropriation, because it was important to signal to investors that the fiscal consolidation is not going to be thrown aside, and also to have an effective IMF program, we must indicate a debt sustainability path, which means, therefore, that the primary balance has to be positive. which we're trying to achieve with this budget. So it's going to be a tight squeeze with regards to, yes, colleague ministers and all others, toeing the line to make sure that we signal this change. Without that, we won't be able to get the sort of come back to the capital markets, get sovereign support from friendly sovereigns, and our syndicated loans, etc.
I was almost say one of the biggest challenges will be expenditure, and how prepared are you to crack the whip and say no when it matters, to ensure that all about the building of confidence is about how we can check our expenses.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately now with digitalization and technology, if it is not approved through the budgetary system, it cannot be paid. So that immediately cuts, access to over expenditure, etc. And that's going to be helpful. We then just need our own discipline to make sure that we don't bring in transactions that should not be in there. But the goods and services are clear, CapEx is clear, and we just have to manage this period within that box. I think the key issue this season is the issue of cost of living, and therefore the intervention by government with the COLA. It was an important intervention, which I think will bring a sense of stability and everybody being taken care of, so that we then have a clarity on what we are going to spend on compensation, which is important. All other issues in terms of CapEx and goods and services, we have to manage. As revenues come down, also the issue of government grants and statutory funds also come down, and that sort of helps us to balance the way forward.
In one breath, we were excited that there wasn't a supplementary budget. In another breath, we're all thinking about how do we manage the rise in expenditure that could be genuine. These are indeed serious expenditures we have to deal with.
Yeah.
How difficult was it for you to take that decision, that lesson?
It is, because obviously cost of living allowances brought in an additional 1.8 billion or so, which was not expected. Interest expenses, as you know, moved from maybe 37 to 41 billion or so. And so that's also, a difficulty that we need to take care of. And then IPPs, another 1.3 billion or so, because we haven't finished with the negotiations, but we are very excited about where we are. But then statutory funds go down because of the nature of revenues coming down. So that will give us some space to operate. But I mean, this is a finance minister that colleague ministers will say, never really was really fiscally tight. So I guess we just have to continue with that reputation and keep things tight going forward. But yes, we will stick within our ABFA, domestic capex. We'll stick within our goods and services and revise that downwards by almost 4 billion cedis. So those will be helpful to that, because we need to prove that we can manage within the ambit of the revenues that we get, and then be able to then have resources to support growth. But we also are realistic about it, because you see we cut growth from about 5.8% to 3.7%, and that's really signaling the difficulties that the whole world is having with this issue. But at the very least, key interventions of Youth Start, for example, are going to be key, because the issue that we need to take care of is cost of living. That's critical, and therefore people having jobs to be able to survive in this environment. And as we declared in the original budget, an entrepreneurial nation has to be built. And so our fierce sense of urgency to make sure that jobs are created is going to be fundamental to that. Because I think the creativity of Ghanaians, once we are able to have a package where there's training and there's access to capital, is going to be key going forward. So when you look at the intervention, even in the middle of this crisis of the launching of the development bank with $750 million, that's real. It's not, something that we are dreaming of. And that is supposed to then bring in the type of long-term capital at affordable rates that the market or the country has been looking for. And we are hoping this will propel, agribusiness industry, SMEs, as they are able to give resources to the banking infrastructure.
Earlier on, you spoke about the discussions and IMF and all those things. I mean, how is it going itself, the discussion with the fund?
The fund was in town. I think we announced to the world that we are going to begin engagement with the fund maybe July 1st. Fund was able to put together a mission to come to Accra July 6th and stayed for a week, in which an assessment was being done where the economy is going. And then we also beginning to discuss with them our enhanced domestic program that we intend to use as a basis for any discussions or negotiations. I think a statement was given after they left, and generally recognized the impact of COVID, the Russian invasion, general global malaise, and the grimness of the outlook, and therefore debts going up all around the globe, and inflation climbing to 40-year highs around, and therefore impact on currency. So I think that was acknowledged. And then also acknowledged was the fact that we hadn't been able to go to the capital markets this year, which means that $2–3 billion that we usually have are not available. So it's an engagement with them to look at a debt sustainable program, which then would enable us to open up access in international markets again and friendly sovereigns, and to find the type of capital we require to go forward. So I think the assessment generally was what one was expecting, and therefore now we are looking forward through the summer of building and completing our enhanced domestic program to then use as a basis for the discussions going forward.
Economists will say all other things being equal. When are we hoping that negotiations for a program would start?
Programs usually take, about 6 months, but the interventions of finding support for balance of payments, has to be immediate, and those discussions are going on. And once people we are talking to realize that we've gone back to the fund, there's a sense of comfort on their side, that the program that we'll have will be legitimate and credible, and therefore they are willing to have more progressive discussions with us with regards to getting resources to support balance of payment needs.
So all other things being equal, hoping that the second quarter of next year negotiations could kickstart?
Negotiations
with the fund for a program?
Yes.
Kickstart in the second quarter of next year?
Well, actually, from now we finished the media review. That clearly is a document that will be used. We are still enhancing our domestic program, and that will be used. So calculating your debt sustainability levels, etc., will all lead to sort of a sense of the resources required in the short term and medium term for us to move forward. We're thinking of maybe a 3-year program, but you remember we inherited one in 2017. In which we were out of that in 2 and a third years, April 2019. We expect to do this as effectively also.
So you're looking at a 3-year program, possibly?
3-year program, possibly, but knowing that within 2 years we must have achieved, most of what we intend to.
How much are you hoping to get from the fund when this?
Well, you don't know. The assessment still goes on. The last time we had about $1 billion for the 3-year program. I think our GDP is now gone up to $591 billion. So that may enhance our quota a bit, and look forward to, anything maybe, 2–3 or so billion dollars over the period, and then get back to the market or friendly sovereigns for the balance that we'll be looking for.
Is Ghana in a good position to get a good program, just like what the president promised us, that we're going to get a good program from the fund? Where good is tough program, or where good is still cushioning the economy, or how
George,
good would be a fund program for Ghana?
I think
right
a good program really is a program that leads to structures that we put in place so that we never return to this, and give ourselves the necessary buffers in the event of these, I guess literally apocalyptic events that have occurred in the world. How strong would you be? If you look at our inflation, for example, is that high because our import content is so high. And this is what we need to fight against. So the existence of the AFCFTA here, I think, gives us a platform to be a continental hub for a lot of things. And therefore, you can see what's happening in the automobile industry. I think we are looking at a financial services hub here. In terms of technology and IT, for Twitter, Amazon, Microsoft and co, to want to be located here themselves. I think Ghana should become the plug-and-play place for technology, and that then opens us up just for immense capacity for industrialization, technology, services, etc. So it's an exciting period to reboot, to recalibrate, and in the heat of COVID was when the president pushed us to come up with the Ghana Cares program, or Batampa program. And so far, they are targeting areas such as rice, poultry, tomatoes, etc., to make sure that we are, we have food security and be able to export and turn these into agribusinesses around the country. So I think it also brings a certain amount of, I guess, deep thinking for Ghanaians ourselves, to really sit back and say, are we going to make ourselves subject to these, constant external shocks or not? And it's a time to stop importing, and it's a time to start manufacturing. And therefore, the banking interventions are to give the resources to encourage people to be more entrepreneurial, set up small businesses, so that we make this change.
No, but we're coming back for us to look at revenue and how do we mobilize revenue to finance all these interesting initiatives. This is a PM Express Business Edition as you look at managing the economy amidst a pandemic and a global crisis. How do you weather the storms, as we engage the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta? I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about managing an economy in the midst of a pandemic, a Russian and Ukrainian war, and also challenging fiscal situation. We're engaging the Minister of Finance, Ken Ofori-Atta. Thank you, Honorable, so much for having time for us. And I'll still come back to the IMF program because there are people out there who still are struggling to connect it to Ghana Beyond Aid, and also the bit about whether Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta is really committed to this program as you leading government's team.
George, there's no question about it in terms of commitment to it. Because really, as you have yourself said, the global situation, as the managing director of the IMF said, is grim. And the dark clouds are not, over yet, and they'll continue. So you look at your resource envelope, look at where you can get the appropriate support to move forward, and truly the need to engage the fund wasn't very clear. And given our commitment to achieving our Ghana Beyond Aid, one cannot have one's statements in the past being the reason for not looking for a solution that will get us to a Ghana Beyond Aid. So I'm sure it's disappointing for all of us, but really what has occurred in this period is like nothing we've seen before. And for us as a government, once we commit to something, we intend to do it. And so we will go through this very successfully and quickly.
This too shall pass.
This too shall pass.
Let's come to revenue and how is government trying to deal with the situation where you revised all your macro targets down? Inflation 28.5. Eating away the real value that I'm holding. How are we going to get around the revenue challenge? Because for some, maybe the challenge is revenue. The more revenue we raised, maybe we won't be here talking about expenditure and fiscal situation getting bad.
True. That's very true. And therefore, the issue of the challenges we've had with e-levy is going to be important as we assess it and find ways of eliminating the leakages or exemptions that we have. And we'll do that during this coming time. I mean, we expected to raise some 600 million CDs a month or so, and we are barely 10% of that, given the exemptions that we gave and the leakages that we have seen. So that will be investigated, and I think we should be able to plug those holes, and that will be helpful. We've gotten lucky in a sense with regards to oil revenues. That will be another 6 billion, and that will be helpful to us to mute the loss in revenues from e-levy. But e-levy remains an important platform because the country is going much more e-commerce than had ever been, and that will continue. I think we had about 1 trillion CDs worth of transactions by the end of last year, and we think that's going to accelerate. I think it gives us a chance for all of us to contribute to this Ghana Beyond Aid vision. The disappointment in going to the IMF also signals people believe that the Ghana Beyond Aid is a vision for the president that we all as a nation buy into. And so why should we do this? But times are also unprecedented, and therefore it called for a turnabout as we have done. But we need to do this quickly, effectively, and for all of us to burden share and to ensure that we have the resources to be able to move forward. And that's really the key for going forward. So yes, understand the disappointment, but also yes, we recognize that there has to be burden sharing and sacrifice from all of us in terms of paying taxes to be able to move this country where we want it to go.
But you spoke about the e-levy. There are some who are still calling for it to be scrapped because it's not doing well. Do I get from the ministry's position that, George, is a no-no, we are rather working to deal with all the consents?
I think you're right. It's a no-no. We have to pursue it because it's an important tax handle that will enable all of us to contribute in one fell swoop and has the capacity of a compliance once the leakages and exemptions are taken care of. That then brings in the type of resources that we need. George, nobody likes to pay taxes, and when it comes to a tax system that you may not be able to dodge or avoid, it becomes a little intimidating, or you might feel like the coerciveness of the state. But truly, the country has to be run with taxes. What are the important tax handles that you can have? And I believe that e-levy is one of them going forward. Country is going to continue to be digitalized. Use of currency is going to be minimized over time. And so this is what then will capture all of us in a bucket in which we can then develop and transform our country.
But mobilization is not doing well. I mean, you did a projection, and in terms of collection, it's not doing well. Do you think that should influence any adjustment going forward?
Adjustment, I mean, in the sense of the assumptions that we gave, to really look at them and really eliminate, as many of the assumptions as possible in line with our assumptions bill that has now, been passed by Parliament. And that's key. I mean, we need to get all of us contributing to it. And once we do that, we should be able to move this transformation agenda forward.
There's call to also look at the rate as well. Is that something that will be on the table?
We looked at the rate at the beginning, went through the country, brought it down to 1.5. Now let's look at the assumptions first, and then we will then titrate if anything else have to be done.
0.5?
I don't know where that number emanated from, but everybody seems to have it on their lips.
Yeah.
No, I think the key issue is really the issue of merchant to merchant, paying through Ghana.gov, agent to agent, the banking systems, exemptions, etc. Once that is thoroughly examined and we can figure out exactly what we can get from that, then we can look at other things.
So, I mean, it's on the table. It's not a no to that.
Everything is always on the table, but really, I think what we have figured out now is that the exemptions regime must be thoroughly analyzed. I mean,
you spoke about an exemption, and an exemption bill was passed recently in Parliament. How do you see this, or looking forward to this as a real game changer in terms of, again, the revenue mobilization bit as well for the economy?
I think we're losing somewhere close to 2 odd billion cedis a year. So imagine quite a bit of that being saved to add to our revenue bucket. That would be important. You know, so it's a whole series of leakages that as a society we've been used to, and now just beginning to clamp down and say the resources of the Republic must be protected. And that's what we did. And we can see how that crept into the e-levy through the discussions, etc. So those also have to be eliminated, and I think we'll be able to get that.
But are you optimistic about the revenue situation end of year?
As to what we have done?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, because we were very aggressive about recognizing compliance. So I think it was about maybe 16.45 billion cedis, and we cut it down by about 10 billion. So that's how aggressive we are with regards to just the reality of losing those 5 months of revenue. And exemptions bill was just recently passed, maybe a week or so ago. So we've been really delayed in the revenue measures, and then the issues that we've had with e-levy, which we've now recognized. So certainly, in terms of the revenue outlook, we are very confident about that. I mean, e-levy is now, we put in 611 million for it, you know. Eliminate the exemptions, I think we'll be back to 600 million a month, and that will make the difference.
You talked about the free SHS, and even in the media review, you talked about it as well. Before that, in your address to the Finance Committee, you also talked about how challenging the situation is. I remember previously you made a comment or a call that, well, maybe can we look at a situation where if George Wiafe can pay for his kid who is going to Presec Legon for Miss Legon, do you think that that call has become more relevant now of the burden sharing when it comes to the free SHS program, or the country can raise the money to fund it?
I think you're right. I mean, the issue, George, that we have to contend with is that that kid, by being a citizen, has his right for education. The moral right of the parents to look after them is all there, but that can be legislated. So me as a government need to ensure that that kid can go to school. Okay, we can now also, because we are getting more and more digitalized, I can find a means of knowing, assuming a means test, you know, is what you are alluding to. We can be more scientific about that. And maybe because it's more digitalized, I can also get my income from you much more so than before. So yes, and if we have maybe scholarship schemes, then that means that you have to prove that you need scholarship. You know, so we can get very sophisticated about that to ensure that you draw in parents in a way that is not coercive, but never compromise on that citizen who is less than 18 being able to get that education that is important. Because all of us really, given our backgrounds where we came from, if not for education, we won't be sitting here. And that really is a human capital that we need for this great Ghana that we all aspire to. So efficiencies will be looked at. I mean, in the end, if you look at the education budget, I mean, senior high school is not like, you know, the tipping of where we want to go. But certainly in any system you have, you look at efficiencies, you find ways of making it more effective. And that, I think, we have a great education minister who is constantly tweaking these things so it will get better.
So the review is on the table, right?
Review is constantly on the table, you know, and it's just to make sure that the appropriate education is given, that wastages are eliminated, and that, you know, it goes to give us value for money.
But Minister, some will say that he who calls the piper calls the tune. You are calling, playing the piper. You signing the checks. You would influence this review on a roll.
Oh, it's a cabinet decision.
Okay, sorry, cabinet,
I'll certainly bring the numbers on the table for active and spirited discussions, and then we go on. I mean, as a government, the issue of value for money, you know, is important to us, and so we'll continue to look at our flagships, you know, make sure that they are efficient and that wastages are eliminated. That I can assure you of.
There's an adjournment whose kid is benefiting from this free SHS.
Okay.
There's Joe the plumber somewhere in the rural area that is benefiting from the One District, One Factory initiatives, Agenda 111. There are some people out there who are worried that as you try to cut down, be more prudent, and even go into an IMF program, reality will strike.
Yeah.
What is the fate of these programs?
George, I think we need to cast our mind back and not too far away that we inherited an IMF program in 2017. And it was during this period that we effected these groundbreaking flagship programs to roaring success. So clearly they will not be compromised because we feel it as crucial to the bridge to the future. Okay. The issue that you raise is how do you cut out wastages, inefficiencies, etc., and that we'll aggressively do.
30%, you've done about 30% cut.
Yeah.
Can we do more?
Well, after a point, you know, even if you look at, let's say, the central bank's increase in the monetary policy rates, about 450 basis points, you reckon that 2 days ago they came out with the rate and they left it flat where it was. After a certain point, it becomes really diminishing returns in any way. If you cut some more, then things can't move. So I think we've done quite well. We've saved maybe about 4 or 5 billion through these 30% cuts over this half year. And so that's good. The question now is to ratchet up revenue so that we can do what we have to do. Beyond a certain amount, it makes nonsense of the issue of cutting. But I think government has responded very well to the 30% cut, and that's important.
Our debt stock, some are saying it's rising.
Yeah.
Worried, and are you going to take some more aggressive measures because of the linkage of the debt to the investor confidence and also our return to the international market as well?
Yeah, and I think that's what, for us to be able to engage with the fund, we need a debt sustainability formula, which clearly would show that primary balances are positive, and therefore you are not borrowing to pay for your debts. You know, so that formula has to be in place. I think we now have about 393 billion CDs worth of that, exacerbated by the hike in interest rates that we're experiencing because of inflation. And so the issue of containing those debts, increasing our revenue is really the key to sort of moving out of that. I mean, fortunately, because we managed to continue growth 0.4% in 2020, 4% in 2021, and now this quarter 3.3%. We've had a GDP growth to about 591 billion, which then has brought our debt to GDP ratio to actually 6.6, you know, 66.7%. So at least on the debt to GDP side, as long as we continue to get out some growth. The GDP will be able to handle it. Then it comes to working capital issues. How do you service these debts? And this is where our revenue and our entry into the international markets become important. So those things we have to solve.
Is it something that will be on the table if we're able to quickly put the program to, as in getting back to the market again?
Oh, definitely. I mean, because our savings still lag behind the investment that will require to be able to attain the 7, 8, 10% growth on a consistent basis. So yes, outside capital is always needed.
So you spoke about the crude revenues that have come in, and there are some who look at the half-year numbers with respect to earnings from crude, and they still think that something has to be done about using those earnings to cushion you and I when it comes to prices of petroleum products at the pumps. Is this something that you're looking to look at?
Well, we can really do but so much, you know, and we just have to weigh what we need these resources for, and what this is translating to in terms of transport charges, which affects everybody, and manage that. So it's a titrating issue of priorities and importance, and therefore intervention like COLA is a signal that we recognize that. However, if it has moved, because we are a net importer, yeah, of about 1 to 4, 1 to 5, it will be impossible to subsidize, you know, all of that. The question is whether you can have means of ensuring that food prices are contained, in the very least, that you have access in the banking system for people to have resources to be able to create jobs. Those become a new paradigm of how we are going to move forward, because I think the whole world's economic circumstances have just shifted quite dramatically.
I asked this question because there are some who said about the connection between prices at the pumps when it comes to petroleum products and inflation, and if government can step in and cushion us, maybe that could also help dampen the rising effect and use some of the savings or windfalls that have come into cushion.
I mean, when you move from $70 to $105, you know, a stable state, it really becomes very difficult to be able to subsidize that away. We did do that for a bit in terms of the special petroleum tax being eliminated through April or so, but the prices just continued to jump up in terms of the world crude price, which therefore was not able to hold onto it. But in investigating the impact of transportation and therefore a haulage system that will bring food especially to the urban areas, that is a special committee cabinet doing that, and we think that intervention, once the policy is outlined, will be helpful.
The petroleum prices, we want to see
we can contain them, can we?
Because the windfall, someone said that maybe the windfalls can use them to do that.
Yeah, well, you can use it to do something.
Yeah.
The question is, where should it go for it to be most effective for everybody? And that's
so now maybe more the food situation.
The food situation is important. You know, the issue of kids going to school, making sure they are fed. The issue of managing our health systems. You know, between 2017 and now, I think we've employed maybe close to 300,000 people into education, health, and security services. And these are all jobs. During the COVID, as you know, we kept everybody paid, which did not happen in most countries. So those are all sort of the buffers that you need for interventions of that nature. So it's not just a one-sided view of that. And but we are confident, given the pragmatic way in which we have looked at revenues going forward, you know, any add-on gives us the buffer to be able to use it for other things.
But since you've spoken about revenue, I'll be coming back to look at the banking sector, the banking cleanup, and there are some who still raise issues about it. But how is the banks doing right now, and whether it justified that action or not? And also the bit about organized labor. Some have said that COLA was just a test of more to come in terms of them demanding for more. How do we deal with that one? This is PM Express Business Edition. Take a short break and be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we speak about pandemic, war, fiscal, and restoring investor confidence in the economy, and an IMF program with Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. Honorable, we're talking about the banking sector cleanup. And there are some who are still worried or whether we should have done this or not.
Yeah. I think it's always, you can't continue second guessing yourself. I mean, we came and met an asset quality review which indicated that our banks were going bankrupt. And I think it was even evident to depositors that they were having challenges when they were moving their accounts or monies out of different accounts. Anyway, we took the hard and difficult decision because we were 4.6 million or so depositors' money at risk, and clearly infractions, in the banking system was not one that would strengthen it. At the end of the day, 4.6 million depositors' funds were saved. And now when you look at the banking system, George, it's very different than what we met in 2016 or 2017. We have moved these banks, which were sort of making losses, from about 2.2 or 3 billion CDs of profit before taxes to 7.5 billion, in which credit to the private sector has increased enormously. So it's a very changed environment, and we need to be clear on that. We also, as you remember, created GATT, which was to ensure that the indigenous banks were supported for them to make the capital they needed, and then created Consolidated Bank, which then in a sense mopped up all of the other banks that could not be, which is still Ghanaian. So the Ghanaian presence was retained, and given a chance for survivability through Consolidated Bank and or direct supports to the Prudentials and Omni Basics, etc., etc. So I think we've done very well in that, because you look then at the whole financial ecosystem, and then also the introduction of Development Bank of Ghana, which will then be sort of a permanent feature in supporting lines of credit or facilities for the financial framework. And that then enables us to move into an entrepreneurial state in which SMEs will be supported to move forward. So I don't think we have much apologies for what we did in the banking system. We are clear that it was the right decision to make. We are confident that it will continue to be as robust as we are encountering now.
Some SDIs are still having some little problems as well, and is government also going to, as in some liquidity issues, government going to help them as well, as in how you manage the situation in the banking space that now we are okay with it?
Yeah, I think that is not fully resolved, and that has to be with time. The resources that we have, with what the receiver is able to bring us, to cushion us to be able to also tackle all of that. But it's a lot of money. It's 25 billion that we spent in that space. And so we need to be careful, how much more we spend and spend it effectively. But certainly it has to be tackled.
You talked about spending here. We managed the COVID situation. We've heard about Nedberg and others also coming as well.
Who also coming as well?
In terms of the disease, monkeypox, and then Nedberg as well. I mean, for you, how strong is the fiscal space to manage?
Well, you know what we are doing with regards to trying to work within our appropriation. And we'll continue to do that and try to drive revenue. I think for investors, we need to exhibit the issue of fiscal consolidation. We need to be clear to them on debt sustainability in a way in which we are reconciling with the fund We need to be clear on doing a primary balance to see the trajectory of how we support our debt. But also they need to be sure that we are still putting our eye on growth because that in the end is what will sustain us. So it's kind of an interesting balancing act, but clearly I think that was a signal and we wanted to give through this budget that we are not going to spend beyond our appropriation. We're going to keep it in the tax handles that we envisioned. We have cut down to size by about 10 billion from the 16, and then we're going to make up, through more effective introduction of EVAT, VAT customs, property taxes, and then we're looking at e-levy to eliminate the exemption so that we can move forward.
The challenge of keeping within our appropriation and fiscal space, and it's organized labor that believes that they are not getting their pound of flesh or getting what they deserve, truly deserve. How are you going to deal with this challenge?
Yeah, I think, George, this government has been true to labor, I would suspect more than most people. We have a platform, partnership with labor that really has been effective in terms of discussing issues and knowing where things are going. Maybe 3 weeks ago, in which we were able to avert potential problem of cost of living allowances. And the president was very clear about that. Instead of just negotiating with 1 or 2 unions, bring everybody together and let's agree on the state of the economy and therefore agree on how we are going to burden share to go forward. And we had to find close to 2 billion CDs to be able to do that. So that, was a clear commitment of government, understanding that the cost of living is harsh on everybody, but this is what we can do. So I think we have done it in a Ghanaian way better than most countries could have, by sitting down, looking at the problem and saying, okay, then how do we protect the Republic from unrest or whatever, but more importantly, how do we acknowledge that cost of living has gone up, and therefore what is it that government can offer going forward, knowing very well that during the COVID period, unlike most countries, we did not lay people off. People got their salaries. Teachers who were home for 9 months also got paid. So there's a government that clearly, is in tune with the issues of cost of living and finds ways to make sure that people are cushioned. And we'll continue in that spirit going forward.
But you've done COLA for the public sector workers. What about those in the informal sector and broader Ghanaians? What will be our COLA?
Well, I think that signals, the good faith that others should follow to do. And that's it. And then, of course, how do we get this macro stability so that cost of living goes down, or tackle food so that the haulage and transportation costs are somehow managed in a way in which food prices, come down.
The PPP for the roads, what will happen to social roads as well? When you announced in the media review about going forward, what will happen to social roads as well?
I did announce in the November budget that all public roads will be zero rated. Zero, we did not eliminate toll roads, we zero rated them, which means that they can come back. But I think that they should come back in a way in which if I'm riding on that road, there's a reason for me to be paying tolls. The roads should be good. But what we have now are also PPPs, public-private partnerships, and that was not part of the statement that I made in November 2021. And so yes, we were looking at the Tema motorway, which we are looking at a 6-lane on both sides going forward. It's going to cost quite a bit of money, maybe $340 million or so, and that will be a public-private partnership, and therefore it will be told to be able to get back the resources that you put in there. But yes, public roads were zero rated at that time, and until such time as we find a means of getting it electronic, the roads being a lot better, it remains where they are.
Your final thoughts too. First, let's look at the investor community.
Yeah.
And then maybe let's come to Ghanaians as well.
Investor community. You know, given what we went through with Parliament last year and the delay in our revenue measures, we got downgraded. And that really hurt the country in terms of access to international capital markets. So that's one. So our spreads widened considerably, and therefore access to the international market was sort of shut off. The question now, with our return of engagement to IMF, I think they've gotten more comfortable in it. I think this mid-year budget in which we are sticking within our appropriation also give them confidence as to our seriousness in our fiscal consolidation exercise, which we initiated over the 30% cuts in government services, et cetera, and that we did. So we are hoping that these are all signals to them to know that this country is ready. Yes, like the countries they are in, we've all been hit with the Ukraine war or COVID or cost of living, which they're experiencing. But Ghana, as Ghana is taking the bull by the horn and saying we'll wrestle this down, we'll move into our Ghana beyond a trajectory. The transformation would occur. They have seen us do it before from 2017 through the COVID period, manage the COVID better than most people, and this will still be the country for them to invest in.
Honorable, sorry, you talked about the downgrade there. With an IMF program right now, and some of these fiscal tough measures that you've taken, are you expecting that they will respond accordingly with respect to our ratings?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I think there will always be a period of testing them to see whether what you are saying is sustainable, but clearly you are on the path of being on the path of debt sustainability is important to them. The sense that the IMF is engaged and therefore with your what we call our enhanced domestic program is important, and that means for them as a country with the energy and commitment to go forward. And that should open us back to the international capital markets in short order.
Governor Jones works at Abosu Kind, and in wrapping up your final thought for those Ghanaians down there who are seeing inflation going up, soaring up, and all the rest. What do you have to tell these people out there who've been hit hard in terms of your ends and all the rest?
Yeah. You know, those are, as I mentioned in the budget, is what keeps the president and his team awake at night. It's not a good feeling for this apocalyptic event that has occurred. The question is our commitment to get our macro stability, make sure that there is food on everybody's table, and make sure that kids are still being taken care of so that at least the burden of going to school still resides with us. Make sure that we get training out through the Youth Start program so that their children will also have jobs to do and train, and make sure that the banking system, you know, is nimble and strong for them to be able to get resources to do it. Because people are entrepreneurial, people, Ghanaians like to work, are hardworking, and our challenge is to make sure that the environment is strong enough, at least access to financing is available in a way in which they can afford. And that's what we intend to do. I think we've done it before, they've seen us do it. The level of empathy is more than I've seen in most governments. It troubles us, and we do intend to get through this in a shared and enhanced way, in a sacrificial way, but knowing that this cherished Ghana Beyond aid, which really is what, in a sense, created a disappointment that, you know, we knew we were going to do this by ourselves, and we now have to do it this other way. But I think working together, we should exit ourselves from the fund and know that we are this blessed country that the Lord has divined.
Honorable, I appreciate your time, Thomas, and I thank you so much for your time and having time to engage us on all these issues, Honorable.
Thank you very much. Good talking to you.
There's been PM Express Business Edition as we get the Minister on how government is managing the situation in these challenging times. It's PM Express Business Edition. Have a great day.